My name is Steve. I'm 48. I live just east of Seattle, where the rain never quite stops and the streets always smell faintly of pine and wet concrete. My hands are calloused. I know tools better than people. I married Maggie 7 years ago, and I thought love could be built like a house, brick by brick if you're willing to bleed for it. She came with a son, Zach. He was 12 when I moved into their lives. A boy with a narrow face and a silent, armored stare. His real father was still in the picture in the way a crack in the glass is still in the window. Present, but broken. The kind of man who remembered birthdays 2 weeks late and made promises he couldn't pronounce, let alone keep. So I stepped in not to replace but to reinforce. I was the scaffolding they leaned on. I bought Zach his first toolkit when he was 13. Not plastic, real steel. Taught him how to fix a flat. Held a flashlight in the rain while he cursed at a rusted bolt. I took him to school when Maggie had morning shifts. Stayed up late helping him rebuild a model engine he forgot was due. I sat through school plays where he had no lines. Clapped like he was the star. And for a while, that seemed to mean something. He'd smile sometimes. He'd ask for help with his science projects. I thought, maybe this is what healing looks like. Not sudden. Not grand. Just quiet steps across a floor you hope won't cave in. But the cracks were already there. Hairline fractures running through every memory I tried to lay down. When Zach turned 16, he started to retreat. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just less. Less talk, less eye contact, less presence. His room became a border I had to knock on. He got quiet around me, the kind of quiet that carries judgment. Like everything I said had already failed some invisible test. And then came the phrase, his mantra, 5 words that turned into a blade. You're not my father. He said it like he was saying pass the salt. No fire, just fact. Like I'd mistaken my role. Like I'd been reading a part in the wrong script. I still paid his car insurance. Still patched the dent in his fender after he lied about hitting a parking post. I bought his prom suit. Watched him walk out the door with a girl I'd never been introduced to. Maggie took pictures on her phone. I stood just off frame. Always just off frame. I remember once, he was 17, he came home from school and tossed his backpack down like the floor owed him something. I asked how his day was. He shrugged. I said, hey, I was thinking we could finish that old V6 in the garage this weekend. He didn't look up. Just said, it's fine, Steve. I'll figure it out. Steve. Not dad. Not even man who's paid for every goddamn piece of your teenage freedom. Just Steve. Like I was a neighbor who'd overstayed his visit. Maggie said I was overreacting. That boys his age need space. That his father, his real father, had been calling again trying to reconnect. That maybe Zach was just confused. But confusion doesn't write you out of your own home. Confusion doesn't look you in the eye and erase you. I started to notice things. Subtle things. Family photos with me cropped out. Instagram stories where Maggie and Zach went out to dinner, posted pictures, and I'd only hear about it when I saw the tags. Dinner with mom, the caption would say. Not us. Not family. Just the bloodline. Sometimes he'd be on the phone in the living room. I'd hear him say things like, it's just Steve. He doesn't get it. Or worse, Steve pays for everything, but he doesn't matter. I tried to confront Maggie once. Told her it hurt. That I felt like a stranger in my own home. She sighed. Said I was being sensitive. Said Zach was still figuring things out. But when a boy is hungry, he doesn't bite the hand that feeds him. Not unless someone taught him that hand is disposable. By the time he graduated high school, I'd stopped hoping for gratitude. I didn't want thanks. I wanted decency. A nod, even. Something that said I see you. Instead, he crossed the stage, took his diploma, smiled at Maggie in the crowd, and walked right past me in the parking lot like I was another parent's plus one. I kept paying. That's the part no one talks about. The slow financial bleed. The invisible ledger in your soul. Gas cards, phone plans, health insurance, college prep courses. I paid every bill like I was trying to earn a place at the table. And still, I was invisible. The worst part? It wasn't the disrespect. It was the complicity. Maggie never corrected him. Never stepped in when he spoke to me like I was an inconvenience. She'd offer me silent looks sometimes, halfway between guilt and surrender. But she never said the one thing I needed to hear, "You're his father too." So I faded. Into the walls. Into the quiet. I started spending more time in the garage. Bought an old Triumph I didn't need. Spent hours tinkering. Not fixing, just tearing things apart just to understand what had worn down, what had rusted through. Felt metaphorical. Felt true. Zach got into a local college. Didn't thank me. Didn't ask me for help. Just told Maggie, who told me, and I, like always, did the math. Found a cheap place near campus. Put the deposit down. Set up an account to cover rent, utilities, groceries. I didn't even ask him to say thanks. I just wanted him to feel secure. To believe someone had his back. Because that's what fathers do, right? Even if they're ghosts. The apartment was modest, 2 bedrooms, off campus, 40 minutes from the house. Clean, quiet, a good place to start. I found it online, toured it alone, signed the lease under my name. I paid the security deposit, the first month's rent, set up autopay on the utilities. I even stocked the fridge before he moved in: milk, eggs, frozen pizza, a 12-pack of soda he liked. He never thanked me. I told Maggie I wanted him to have a space to grow. She smiled, kissed my cheek. "You're good to him," she said. But she didn't say it like it meant anything. Zach moved in 2 weeks before classes started. Maggie helped him decorate. She bought him curtains, plates, small plants for the windowsill. I noticed she never mentioned my name when she introduced me to the neighbors or his friends. Just, "This is Steve." Not husband. Not stepfather. Just Steve. We left that evening with empty arms and full silence. I asked if she wanted to get dinner. She said she was tired. We drove home without the radio. The kind of quiet that doesn't rest, the kind that breathes in the back seat. A few days later, Maggie showed me pictures from Zach's housewarming party. He hadn't invited us. She had seen them on social media. Friends drinking on the patio. A banner that said "New Start." I zoomed in on the photo and saw the flat screen I bought, the couch I'd hauled up the stairs by myself. There was a caption. "We did it. Just me and Mom. We did it." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not because of what it said, but because of what it erased. The invisible man. The extra in the story. Maggie didn't say anything. She just closed the app. Her hands trembled slightly, but her lips were still. No protest. No defense. Just acceptance. 2 days later, we dropped by unannounced. I carried a bag of groceries. Meat, canned goods, eggs. The kind of food you buy when you remember what it means to be poor. Zach opened the door with surprise, masking it with a practiced smile. "Oh, hey." We stepped inside. The music was low. The apartment smelled like burnt toast and cologne. He didn't offer us seats. Maggie asked how things were. He nodded, gave clipped answers. I set the grocery bag on the counter and excused myself to use the bathroom. That's when I heard it. Voices from the living room. Laughter. Someone asked, "Who was that guy with your mom?" And Zach. My stepson, the boy I raised, the boy whose rent I paid and whose car I kept running, answered without hesitation. "Oh, Steve? He's just an extra in our story. Mom got us here on her own." I froze. Time stilled. My breath stuck halfway between lungs and throat. I didn't move. I didn't flush the toilet. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, listening. Laughter. Then a new song started. The conversation moved on. But I didn't. An extra in our story. The words sank like wet cement. I walked out of the bathroom slowly. My hands were trembling, but my face was calm. I said nothing. Maggie looked at me. Maybe she knew. Maybe she saw something in my eyes. We said goodbye. He nodded. That was it. We got into the car. I drove. Maggie was silent. She stared out the window the whole ride home, biting the inside of her cheek. When we pulled into the driveway, she finally said, "I'm sorry." I nodded. Said nothing. What was there to say? That night I sat in the garage. Just sat. No engine work. No music. Just a stool and the dark. my hands in my lap, my mouth dry. I stared at the Triumph. Half finished. Beautiful. Broken in ways no one but me would ever notice. I remembered sanding its frame for hours, sweating through my shirt, getting metal shavings in my eyes. I remembered how Zach once walked in and asked why I bothered with old junk. I told him some things are worth saving. That night I realized something else. Some things are not. The next morning, before the sun was up, I brewed coffee and opened my laptop. I logged into the banking portal. My hands were steady now. No hesitation. First, I closed the sub-account I'd created for Zach, the one that paid his rent. Then I went into the utilities page. Canceled electricity, internet, water, insurance, both health and auto. I removed my card. The apartment? I called the landlord, explained the situation. Told him Zach would need to sign a new lease if he wanted to stay. That the previous agreement had ended. He asked if there was a problem. I said, no, just a correction. That was it. I didn't tell Maggie. Not right away. She was asleep upstairs. I let her rest. I let the silence do the talking. By noon the next day, the first text arrived. Zach, hey, did the internet go down? I didn't reply. Then later, power's out. Can you check it? Still nothing. That evening, are you seeing this? My utilities are off. This isn't funny. I turned off my phone. The next morning Maggie asked if I'd heard from Zach. Not recently, I said, which wasn't a lie. 3 days later, she said he was staying with a friend. That he got an eviction warning. That he was calling but she wasn't sure what to tell him. I shrugged. That evening he texted again. Why would you do this to me? I stared at the message. Watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, appear again. Then I answered. One line. Tell that to your new hero. Maybe he'll cover your bill. He never responded. Maggie came to me that night. Stood in the garage doorway while I sanded down the tank of the Triumph. You really did it, she said. Not accusatory. Just surprised. I did, I said, still sanding. He's scared. He made a choice. She didn't argue, because the truth was, she had heard it too. In that living room. Just an extra in our story. She had stood beside me in that apartment and said nothing. Now we all lived with the silence. The next week passed slowly. Zach stopped calling. Maggie stopped bringing him up. The house grew quieter. We became ghosts in a life we had built together. I started staying longer in the garage. Picked up side jobs. Small engine repair. Carburetor rebuilds. Anything to keep my hands busy and my mind elsewhere. People think betrayal comes like thunder. It doesn't. It comes in silence. It comes when the people you've bled for pretend you were never there. But I was there. I have the receipts. The silence lasted 8 days. Not the kind of silence you find in nature. Not peaceful, not clean. This was a silence born of tension. A kind of waiting. Like the moment before a nail gives beneath the weight of a house. Like the air right before glass breaks. Maggie moved through the house carefully, as if afraid to touch anything that might shatter. She didn't mention Zach. She didn't ask questions. And I didn't volunteer answers. I spent most nights in the garage, hands deep in old engines, wiping grease across my jeans, letting the smell of oil and rust fill the space where conversation used to live. Maggie stopped asking when I'd come to bed. We had dinner in separate rooms. Her silence was no longer passive, it was strategic. But Zach finally broke it. On the 9th day, a knock came at the door. Not frantic, not angry, just steady, like someone who still believed they had a right to be heard. I opened it. There he was. Zach, my stepson. The boy I'd poured thousands into. The boy I'd taught to change brake pads. The boy who once sat on my shoulders at a baseball game when he was 13 because he couldn't see over the crowd. Now he stood on my porch like a stranger trying to return a product without a receipt. His face was tired. Not broken. Just inconvenienced. We need to talk, he said. I stepped aside. He came in, didn't sit. Walked into the kitchen like he still owned the floor plan. Maggie emerged from the hallway. She looked at me first, then at him. "Zach," she breathed, as if his name had been trapped behind her teeth for days. He nodded, barely acknowledging her. "I got the eviction letter," he said. "I have 10 days. I leaned against the doorframe. "Then you've got 9 left." His jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous." Maggie moved toward him. "Honey, maybe if you just—" "Mom!" he snapped, cutting her off. "Please." Then he turned to me. "Look, I know I said some things. I didn't mean all of it." "You said I was just an extra in your story," I replied. "That seems pretty specific." He looked down. "I was frustrated." "No," I said calmly. "You were honest." He said nothing. The silence stretched. Maggie sat on the edge of a chair, like she was about to break herself. Zach finally spoke again. "Okay, fine. I shouldn't have said that. I was being a jerk. But cutting the rent? The power? That's extreme. I have classes. I can't study without electricity." "You said I wasn't your parent," I said. "So I stopped paying your bills." "I never asked you to." "Yes, you did." I cut in. "Every time you let me pay, you asked. Every time you cashed a card, I reloaded. Every time you stepped into that apartment or drove that car I fixed, you asked. You didn't use words. You used expectation. And I answered." Zach's face tightened. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said. "I'm just holding you to your words." He looked at Maggie. "Are you seriously okay with this?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were wet. He laughed bitterly. "Great. So I'm on my own now." "You always said you were," I said. "Maybe now you'll find out what that actually means." Zach left without another word. That night, the power in his apartment went out for good. The next day, I received an email from the university. A tuition installment had bounced. They wanted to know if I had updated my payment method. I didn't reply. A week passed. Maggie tried to bring him up again, gently over coffee, like she was testing water that had once scalded her. "He's staying at a friend's," she said. "But it's temporary. He's worried he might lose his spot at school." I nodded. "That's rough." She looked at me. "Steve." "No," I said quietly. "Not this time." She looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't, because somewhere inside her, maybe for the first time, she understood. 3 days later, Zach called again. This time, he didn't start with small talk. "I need help," he said. "No pretense. No performance. Ask your real dad," I replied. "He won't return my calls." "Not my problem." "He's not going to pay anything," he said, voice rising. "He never does." I didn't speak. "He's not reliable," Zach added, quieter now. "You know that." "I do," I said. "Which is why I stepped in all those years. Which is why this hurts." Silence. Then softer. "I didn't mean what I said. Not all of it." "But you said it," I replied. "And you meant it enough to post it, to say it to your friends. You meant it when you excluded us from your new life. You meant it every time you took what I gave and refused to look me in the eye." He didn't respond. "You made a declaration," I continued. "You drew a line. Now you get to live on that side." "I'm going to lose everything," he whispered. "No," I said. "You're going to find out what it costs to stand alone." He hung up. Maggie didn't speak to me for 2 days. I didn't apologize, because something had shifted. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I wasn't lashing out. I was enforcing the boundary I should have drawn years ago. The line between help and humiliation. Between love and servitude. I watched the fallout unfold like a movie I'd seen before. Zach borrowed Maggie's car. Slept on couches. Missed classes. He tried calling Todd the biological father. The hero. The man who gave him his name and nothing else. But Todd didn't answer. Or maybe he did. Once, and said what he always did. "I'll see what I can do." Which is Todd code for no. Zach stopped reaching out after that. He stopped calling Maggie, too. She cried at night. Not loud. Just a slow leak of grief. But she never blamed me. Because blame only works when the foundation was solid. And ours never really was. She'd chosen silence for too long. Now it was choosing her. A month passed. One morning a letter arrived. From the university. Addressed to me. I opened it. Read the words slowly. They were cutting Zach's enrollment. Non-payment. Final notice. Readmittance not guaranteed. I folded the letter neatly and left it on the kitchen counter. That night Maggie read it. She didn't speak. Instead, she walked into the garage where I was working. Sat on a folding chair beside the Triumph. "Do you ever think this went too far?" she asked. I didn't look up. "Do you?" "I don't know," she said. We sat in silence for a long time. The Triumph's engine block gleamed under the light. Clean. Sharp. Rebuilt. She finally stood to leave. "I wish it hadn't come to this." "So do I said. "But some lessons can't be taught through love. Some need absence." Zach wanted a story without me. Now he had one. But stories without support fall apart. And when the lights go out, when the refrigerator hums one final time, when the heat slips from the vents and never returns, you start to remember the names of the people who paid the bills. Not the ones who share your blood, but the ones who showed up. I never expected him to come back. That's the honest truth. I thought the silence would stretch indefinitely, that Zach would vanish into the same mist his father had drifted through for years. Unreachable, resentful, untouchable. But 2 months after the power was cut, he returned. Not to stay. Not to apologize. Just to be seen. He stood in the driveway like someone waiting for judgment. Same worn hoodie. Same shoulders that once stood taller than mine. But there was something different in the eyes, not regret, not humility. Just fatigue. "I'm dropping out," he said. I nodded. "They said I could reapply next semester. Maybe." I didn't ask if he blamed me. I didn't care. Maggie stepped outside. She didn't say a word. Just looked at him like a woman trying to recognize a son she no longer understood. He glanced between us, the silence stretching again, wider this time. No bridge, just space. "I've been sleeping on a friend's floor," he said. "It's not great." "Life rarely is," I replied. He looked down, kicked a rock across the pavement. "I just thought maybe—" He stopped. "Never mind." "No," I said. "Say it." He swallowed hard. "Maybe we could reset." I let that sit for a moment. "Reset," I repeated. "Like nothing happened?" "No," he said quickly. "Just something new." I stepped forward just once. Looked him in the eyes. "You called me an extra in your story, and then you rewrote the ending without me." He didn't look away. "I don't need another scene, Zach. I'm not auditioning for the part anymore." He nodded slowly. "I get it." And for the first time, I believed he did. He left that night. I don't know where to. Maybe another couch. Maybe nowhere. Maggie cried. Again. Quietly as always. And I returned to my garage. It's warm in there now. I fixed the heater. Installed new lights. Bought a radio. There's peace in that space. A kind of peace that doesn't depend on who remembers your name or who decides you matter. Sometimes Maggie watches me from the kitchen window. Like she's trying to say something she doesn't know how to voice. Like she's waiting for a door I'm no longer opening. We're still married. But the truth? We've stopped building. She asked me once if I wanted to make things right again. If I wanted to reach out, pay again, reconnect. I just smiled. Then I turned on the lights in my workshop. Because I have electricity. And respect. Because when you stop paying for your own invisibility, something strange happens. The world gets quieter. And you finally hear yourself think. So I ask you now, whoever you are, reading this, listening to this, wondering if I was too harsh, would you have paid for your own erasure? Would you have funded the version of the story where your name wasn't even printed in the credits? Or would you have turned off the power too? Tell me, was I wrong?